Hey everybody, Sam here, and today we're going to talk about demons, and not the kind of demons from The Exorcist that can levitate the bed and spin their head around, but demons as it relates to my song, which is about bipolar disorder. I'll start by talking about one of the first books that I really enjoyed as a child. I was in maybe fourth grade, fifth grade, something like that, and I came across The Curious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And in the book, Jekyll creates this potion that he drinks, and he turns into Mr. Hyde. Now, Mr. Hyde has no inhibitions, and one of the things that stuck with me in the book was how Mr. Hyde would do pretty awful things and know that Jekyll would have to pay for it. He wasn't going to have to pay for it, he'd be gone. But Jekyll would be paying the price for Hyde's misdeeds. And that really kind of stuck with me, stayed with me for a long time. In fact, when I write about bipolar things, it's often that I'll say the monster and the man. And that comes up in my song Demons quite a bit too. So when I'm talking about the monster, I'm talking about how when you're bipolar, you're symptomatic. So perhaps you're extremely manic. Your intellect is intact, but your judgment isn't. So in my 20s, I struggled with, I had an alcohol problem. And I remember thinking that, like when I was drunk, that it's not me who's gonna have to pay for it, it's somebody else. It's kind of disassociated. Back to the documentary that I talked about in my last video, there was this lady who talked about how she had lost a 40-year friendship. And think about the impact of that. Somebody that you'd known for 40 years, that you trusted, been friends with, and they're just gone. So when I talk about demons, the song goes, the band didn't break up because the music wasn't good. No, it wasn't perfect. They were doing all they could. Words let slip in anger about all that they'd done wrong. He missed them in the aftermath, but they were just as gone. Full disclosure, I never been in any band. I have owned a business. A couple of years ago, I started a small business in my basement, and I had an assistant that worked with me, became kind of like a partner, very trusted. I brought other people into the business, and one of these guys was kind of constantly in my ear, constantly talking about my assistant. Now, whenever I ran my business, I was in a manic state. Probably the longest manic state that I've had in my entire life. I would sleep 3-4 hours a night, and pretty much the rest of the time I was either working in my regular job or working in my business. I mean, 17, 18, 19 hours a day I was working. As my business expanded, I went to 2 locations, and I expected my assistant to be able to work with the same intensity that I had. Well, the thing is, I can't work with that intensity unless I'm manic, unless I'm in a really manic state. And it was very unreasonable for me to expect him to be able to do what I was doing when I was symptomatic. Part of mania is that you just have this burst of energy. And another part of it is that you tend to work on goal-oriented things. So, for example, whenever I get manic, I will study a lot. I work out quite a bit. I do things that are goal-oriented, and it's not really reasonable for me to expect other people to be able to do the same thing. Next part of the song is, he recalls a time in need when all his friends had fled, with silence just as loud as any words they'd ever said. This is about a time I'd had a job that I worked at for a long time, had been recruited because I was a subject matter expert in my field, and felt pretty safe. Well, I left that job and went into another position, got fired. I reached out to somebody that I had known for years and years and years. And my reputation, I had done really good work for a number of years, but the last year or two, my work had slipped. It was because I was having issues with my disorder. I reached out to him on LinkedIn looking for a job, and nothing. He didn't respond at all. I don't know of another thing that's ever quite hurt me like that. My identity is wrapped up in my disorder, but it's also wrapped up in my job. Being a breadwinner is really important to me. And I had been known as somebody who was capable, who had been recruited to several different positions. So that's what I'm talking about um, when I'm talking about silence just as loud as any words they'd ever said. It was radio silence. So the point of this video is to talk about the song, and that's pretty much the history of it. That's where it comes from. But also, if you've got somebody that's in your life, this isn't really just for people with bipolar disorder, but for people that know them. It's ebbs and flows. What you're capable of at one point, you'll be capable of again. Just because somebody has gone through some issues, because they're symptomatic, because their work has struggled, doesn't mean that it always will. I was also struggling with addiction at the time, heavily, and I'm not anymore. Right now I'm putting out about as good a quality work as I have in my entire life. And my friend had completely disregarded me, wasn't willing to put his reputation on the line. And I understand that and I own that, but that's a big part of the disorder. That's a big part of bipolar, is the consequences. So when he'd outlived all his demons, but not the damage they had done, there may be a time where you're symptomatic and you cause harm as a bipolar person. And you can get past that, go on and live your life, but sometimes it's difficult to get past all the damage that has occurred as a result of being symptomatic. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this video. Please feel free to comment and share your thoughts in the comments. Be nice. I'm bipolar.